Don't forget to subscribe. I have a story to share with you. About 1993, 17 years ago, when I was a teenager, and before everyone had a cell phone in their hand, I used to live at a place about 13 miles outside of Meridian, Mississippi. There's nothing there but hunting and fishing and a man's dream. A lot of creeks, rivers, ponds, small lakes, woods, and old logging roads that went on for miles. Some relatives of mine own a great deal of land close to where I live, and their land was on an old logging road that went to a creek called Tallahala. It is a long and winding creek. This creek in some places is as wide as most rivers, but it's always shallow until it rains. And on my relative's property, close to this creek, they had built a simple one-room cabin for camping. It was built high on 5-foot telephone poles for when the creek floods. It would be above the water line. I had camped there many times, but one fall night when I went camping there, which was my last time to go, I went with some friends, and there were 4 of us. We had been wade fishing all day, and we had planned to stay there the night. So we fished until dark, and went back to the cabin, made a simple fire, hung out, drank a little whiskey that we had borrowed, and cleaned a lot of fish. We did that until about 11 p.m. Then all went into the cabin for the night and lit up a couple of Coleman lanterns and got a good fire going in the wood heater, and we laid down for the night. The next thing I knew, I woke up to some noise in the cabin, and I looked up while rubbing my eyes to see one of my friends almost jogging through the cabin from the door to his bed. I guess I was last to wake up, and I asked, "What are y'all doing?" They said all at once, "Something's out there." I rolled my eyes at them and turned away and laid back down. And I said, "There's nothing out there. Go back to sleep." Just as I finished saying it, I heard the noise. It sounded like limbs breaking in a short distance, and one of my friends yelled, "What the hell is that?" Another replied he didn't know. So let's just say I was awake now. I got up, tried to listen better, and I could hear it. When I put my ear to the wall, I could hear it. What sounded like something hitting trees and walking heavily through the woods next to us. I started to think what that could be. I knew it wasn't a buck. Rutting season is later in the year. And there are black bears here, but I never heard any commotion like this. Plus, it sounded like it was growling. Well, I was freaked now. My friends and I grew up hunting and fishing and camping in the woods, and are very experienced in sights and sounds of the woods and its animals. But I was not familiar with this type of sound and behavior. As I listened, I could hear it pace back and forth through the woods next to us, and it seemed to be breaking limbs. And at one point, it made a loud noise, like a growl. I stepped back from the wall and said, "What are we going to do?" One of my friends asked what we should do. "What do you mean?" I said. "What if whatever that is tries to get in here?" A silence came over all of us, and we were all thinking about the same thing: protection. We scrambled to find what we had. I had a .38 snub-nosed pistol with 5 shells that I always take camping. We had a few knives and a machete and some long logs from the small wood pile inside. So I focused on getting some of the clothes and boots on, and as we were spreading out in the cabin, it stopped. One of my friends thought it was gone. We listened. I thought to myself, what if it's not in the woods anymore? What if it's closer? One of my friends went to the door that had the only diamond-shaped window to look down the steps outside, and I yelled, "Don't open that door." He yelled back that he was just going to have a look. He looked through the window for a while and asked for a flashlight, so we took him one, and he shined it outside for a while and didn't see anything. He asked, "Do y'all want to make a run for the four-wheelers?" And I was trying to think how far they were, about 30 yards from the trail to the logging road. I thought it was a very long walk, and especially if that thing is still out there. We listened for a little longer, all of us still on edge. Then one of my friends asked, "What is it? A pissed off bear, you think?" Another friend replied, "I don't know, but I can't stand this. We got to see what it is. I told them I was staying put. I'm waiting for daylight so I can see. 2 flashlights, 2 lanterns, and 1 little gun isn't enough for me. So everyone agreed and sat back down and waited while one friend stayed looking out the door. It had been 10 or 15 minutes since we had heard any noise. And then all of a sudden a big thud on the back side of the cabin, halfway up the wall. We all scrambled to the center of the cabin, and we all yelled and cussed. And we were yelling at whatever it was to go away. So at this point, I was pissed off, and I thought someone is messing with us. So I ran to the wall where I heard the thud. I banged back on it as hard as I could and yelled, "I have a gun, and I will shoot you." Everyone went quiet to see if we got a response, but we heard nothing. So I put my ear to the wall to see what I could hear. What I heard still freaks me out today. It sounded like heavy breathing, about waist down from me, and what sounded like a hand rubbing against the outside of the wall, like it was trying to find a way in. I stepped back and looked at the wall. It was head level, where I heard what sounded like a hand rubbing the wall. If you were standing outside, you would be almost 12 feet from the ground. As I was thinking about this, one of my friends said, "Did you hear anything?" But I said no. But they knew I did. So I said, "We might need to make a run for it," to the four-wheelers. We walked to the door and got ready. One of my friends said, "When I open this door, don't stop. Just run and crank them up. It don't matter who's driving, just whoever gets there first." I then said, "Let me shoot a couple of times in the air as we run out." 2 of them said, "Okay." The other friend said, "Why is that thing close?" I didn't want to say, but I said yes. And at the moment my friend opened the door, I ran out, shot twice, and ran down the steps. And then I noticed I must have been running slow because I was getting passed up by my friends. So I sped up, and when we were at the four-wheelers, they cranked them up, and we were gone. We had them wide open all the way home. I felt like something was going to snatch me off the back of the thing. So I stayed turned around so I could see behind us, but I didn't see anything. It felt like it took us forever to get back to the house. But at 50 miles per hour, it was probably only 15 minutes until we were back at home. At almost 3 in the morning, I banged on the door until my dad got up, and he was mad. He asked me, "I thought you were camping." He asked what happened, and I said, "We just wanted to come back here." He said, "Where's my cooler and the stuff you took?" I said, "Back at the cabin. We will get it tomorrow." I never saw him so mad that we left everything there, but he could see I was upset, so he left me alone and went back to bed. Needless to say, we did not sleep. We just talked about what it could have been and what was it doing. As we talked and fussed about, our courage was building as the daylight approached. So we waited until about 8 a.m. and loaded up some shotguns and rifles, and we went back ready for whatever we might have to face. When we got there, everything was in order, and they went inside. I went to the back of the cabin and looked up at the wall where I heard the breathing. It was about 8 feet, and where I heard the hand rubbing the wall was about 12 feet. I looked all over the ground, and there was no tracks of any kind, but the ground was hard. But as we searched the woods around the cabin, we did find limbs broke, pulled down from all different heights. Highest was 9 feet, and the lowest was 4 feet. No hairs, no smells, just broken limbs. We looked for hours, then we gathered our things, went back home, and we did not talk about it because we knew people would laugh and make fun of us. So I didn't talk about it again for a few years. It makes a great camping story, of course. People think you're pulling their leg or messing with them. I just laugh along. But I did go camping again a year or more later, just not there. I did go back to the cabin a few times to go fishing, but always during the day. I'm not scared of the woods. I grew up around here, but I do fear what might be in them. So what do I believe it was? I don't know. I didn't see it. So I tried not to think about what it could have been. I just know I don't take my surroundings lightly. And if there is a such thing as a Bigfoot or whatever's out there, I am sure as a wild beast or an animal, it doesn't want to be messed with and can be hostile like a bear, so be careful. One of the most well-known and widely discussed cryptids of all time is Bigfoot, commonly known as Sasquatch, the skunk ape, hairy man, the grass man. Seen all over the continent, they may differ in appearance or behavior, but one thing is usually consistent. They are a huge, menacing creature. And there have been many accounts, all the way from the 19th century up to present day, of a different side to these creatures. A fierce, ferocious beast fully willing and able to attack or even kill. But that's not the common report. The common report is a shy, elusive creature that rarely comes in contact with humans. Bigfoot occurred in the summer of 1924 when 5 prospectors by the name of Marion Smith, his son Roy Smith, Fred Beck, Gabe Lefevre, and John Peterson were out in the wilds of the Mount St. Helens in Washington. The group was out in the remote wilderness working on a claim in the branch right off of the Lewis River, about 8 miles from Spirit Lake, when they came across the first of many oddities. There embedded in the earth was a series of footprints reported as large as 14 inches in length, human-like, massive footprints. Not long after this, the men began to see strange creatures through the trees. They were huge, hulking things, 8 foot tall, man-like creatures, seen on at least 4 occasions, covered in long black hair, with ears protruding 4 inches above its head, pointing straight up. At one point, one of the men, Marion Smith, fired at it, causing the creature to retreat, but not for long. No, this just seemed to make the creature angry and more bolder. And on the morning of July 10th, Beck sighted the creature standing some distance away near the edge of the canyon and decided to take a shot at it. So he took aim, slowly pulls the trigger, and hit the creature directly. The creature staggered, trying to hold on to what life he had left, losing his footing right there at the edge, and plummeting 400 foot down into the canyon floor. Was it dead? It had to be dead. It was perhaps this incident that would start the night of terror for the men at Ape Canyon. What came next was truly terrifying. Later that evening, the men were relaxing in the cabin when out of nowhere they were startled by a sudden, urgent pounding on the roof that seemed to shake the whole structure. Startled, but they managed to get to their feet and grab their rifles, wondering what the hell is going on. It's on the roof. The pounding and thudding continued, terrifying the men. The cabin began to be pelted with large rocks, some of which broke off pieces of the building and came careening straight through the windows and roof, striking one of the men, Beck, knocking him unconscious. There were dozens of creatures prowling outside of the cabin. The other men had fired wildly out into the night and even up through the roof in a panic, desperate attempt to drive the menacing creatures off. The fight lasted all night, and they cowered in their cabin, shooting at the monstrous creatures that were assaulting them from the outside, a creature they named the Mountain Devils. And it was not until morning that they finally were able to escape, leaving their cabin, equipment, and potentially very valuable claim behind, never to return. I want to thank everybody for listening to the channel and all the subscribers that have subscribed. It's been pretty fun to do these videos. I like them. I've always liked the Bigfoot stories and Sasquatch stories. I found it very fascinating. This story was provided by BigfootEncounters.com, and I found it very fascinating, so I wanted to share it with you guys. And it goes like this. I have never been one for having an interest in the unknown or the paranormal, but when someone you trust tells of an experience from their past, sometimes you have to give the benefit of the doubt. I was reading your True Tales about a month ago and came across a story that took place in New Jersey on or about the area of the Doris Duke Farms. After reading it, my jaw dropped because the story gave the one that was told to me validity. My grandfather told me the story back in 1991 a few years before he passed away. And so it goes. My grandfather worked from the late 50s to the early 70s as a landscaper on the Duke Estate in Somerset, New Jersey. When he told this story to my sister and me, he was foggy when giving the exact dates, but he was still very sharp in explaining it in incredible detail. My grandfather's job was to manicure and care for the lawns in the north section of the property, whatever that meant, and other various duties. He said that in the summer of 1972, one afternoon, he was told by the head groundskeeper that he would be working overtime and that he was needed because a shipment was being delivered from Wisconsin. They needed about 8 men to unload the crate and to bring it into the garden area. That night the truck arrived and it was getting late. The men who were asked to stay for overtime were eager to get things done and over with and be on their way. When the truck pulled up, my grandfather said that the crate was about 8 feet tall and 5 feet wide. When he asked what was inside it, the one in charge said, "They are exotic trees." What happened next was enough to make half of the team get up and walk off the job and not care about the consequences. When the men started pushing the crate off of the flatbed truck, a blood-curdling scream was unleashed from within the box. All of the men let go of their grip and the crate fell to the floor. As everyone jumped back, realizing that this was anything but trees, the head keeper did all he could to save the contents' real identity and said there was a black bear inside of it. While the men were regaining their composure, most of the help walked off the job. They said that they didn't want to get hurt or mauled dealing with a wild animal without the proper safety equipment. So off they went, including my grandfather. Only 2 men stayed to finish what they were asked. This was the story told to my grandfather. The 2 men managed to get the load on the dolly and drag it into the garden compound. While guiding the crate down the main path, balance was lost and the crate came off the wheels. The crate hit hard enough to crack the side of the crate and lose the side panel, which fell off and exposed the contents. What the 2 remaining men witnessed that night was enough to make them seek employment elsewhere. What I'm trying to tell you is how it was told to me. Inside the crate was a creature that had the shape of a man, but was anything but a man. They couldn't give a height measurement since the creature was in a sitting position, but they said it was huge. It had the shape of a man with a very large frame, only it was covered with black hair. The creature was strapped down and had shackles on its legs and feet and arms. The face didn't look like a man, but had some human features. The workers said it looked more like a monkey or a gorilla. The hair was extremely long and dirty. At one point, one of the men said that they thought this thing was trying to communicate, but all it did was keep on drooling. They were under the impression that this creature was heavily sedated because it couldn't keep its head up straight. It rested its head on its chest. A couple of inches away from the creature's head was an empty water bottle nailed to the wall. On the other side of the creature was an IV stand connected to the wall and stuck in its arm. It might have been used to feed this creature during the transport. One of the oddest parts to this story was that my grandfather was told that this creature was sitting on a rocking chair. I could never understand this. After thinking about it, though, I think it was maybe to prevent this thing from getting cramps during the move. They also said that the odor was overpowering and enough to make anyone pass out. The combined smells of urine, waste, and body odor was rank. My grandfather stuck by this story until the very end. About 2 weeks before his passing away, my sister reminded me to bring it up again and confront him, which I did. There was no need to go over the story again because we both knew how it went. I just asked him, "Papa, remember that crate you had to move in Jersey?" He just looked at me and smiled and said, "Of course." I said, "Did you embellish it all?" He said, "No. There was no reason to. It happened the way I said it happened." I said, "Because now would be the time to tell me." He looked at me and said, "You want to know if I embellished the story? The truth is that I am guilty of the opposite. There was so much I left out. The story was just the beginning. Remember something, I worked there for 2 more years after that. There are things that a young mind should not hear." So I said, "But I'm not a child anymore. I'm sure I can handle what it is that you have to say." Grandfather said, "Tomorrow. I will finish the story. Come back tomorrow." But there was no tomorrow. Grandfather passed away at 2 a.m. that morning in a New York hospital.